All right, welcome back to A Writer's Mind. I'm your host, Stelshri Spinner, and I am back with an update on the karmic side of these two projects. I just was kind of in a good flow when I finished chapters 3 and 4 and was still kind of thinking about what to do with the not karmic book. So I just kept going with this one. I got 2 more chapters written, which was nice to actually feel like I was kind of really starting to roll on the project and getting a better sense of where I'm going and what I'm doing. And that's what these 2 chapters really kind of felt like I was able to do, was really start solidifying the world and how it worked and how the characters are moving through the world in the story. So with chapter 5, I'm also kind of trying to balance out, again, like the amount of information that I need to share in the beginning as part of the world building, but not having it be like really info jumpy and slowing things down. I want to keep the pace moving while I'm explaining certain aspects of how things work with the characters. So in chapter 5, we're kind of at the point where they got through saving the older gentleman in chapter 4 and getting him help. And then they kind of have a little bit of downtime before returning back to that a little bit. So this was kind of a chance to see what Katie's life is actually like and what she does and whether that's actually going to be helpful information or not. So they end up back at her work and she's kind of going through data and they're looking over reports. And Beatrix is just insanely bored by most of this. It's not her favorite profession to explore and experience as a karmic being. But they get through it and they're really, they're not finding what they need. So originally I had kind of thought like they'd really have to dig into some detailed stuff and some reports and things that are in water and things that aren't. But really, as this is kind of cementing a little bit better in my head, and even knowing from the beginning that the water isn't actually the problem, it's something else associated with the water treatment plant. I did not want to bore readers with, chemical breakdowns and mineral contents and blah, blah, blah. All of that. That would have been super boring to read for most people. I'm sure some people are really interested by that. But I'm guessing the majority of my readers would not want me to give a detailed explanation of a water quality report, which I did look at. And, good to know my town has safe water to drink. So I was glad to see that. But I needed to find a way to bring information in without, again, being super boring. So I decided to, just kind of skim a lot of that. That has all happened in the background by the time we get into the chapter. And the chapter kind of starts with them feeling stuck of okay, well, none of that was helpful whatsoever. And Beatrix being a little bit frustrated that she's feeling they're just not making any progress, which, given that Cal tends to put her into unhelpful people, not surprising, but she's having a little bit more of a struggle than usual for her of kind of finding the thread that she needs to follow and then, going for it and making progress. And I think when I get to the next chapter, because I skimmed over the previous interaction with Cal, and it's just kind of mentioned that it was annoying and pointless as usual, because they really didn't have anything to report at that point. So it would have been a really boring conversation of just, kind of showing both of their pettiness and their arguing, and that really wasn't going to move things along. So I skipped over that one, but I am going to have to, once I get to chapter 7, they are going to need to do a check-in with Cal and kind of report what they found and have that conversation there. Because I was kind of forgetting about him. I was getting caught up in the process of looking and figuring things out, but not remembering that timeline. So I need to remember to pay attention to that, to not forget about him, because he is an important part of Beatrix's life and her progression through the series overall with this relationship with Cal and as things unfold a little bit more. Reminder to myself not to forget about Cal. They need to do their check-ins. But aside from that, so what I ended up doing was leaning into Katie's character a bit more and kind of letting her add some fun to this scene that would have otherwise been a little boring of looking at reports and comparing things and trying to just suss out what's actually happening. So they're back in her office, which is just kind of an explosion of color and stuffies and all kinds of posters and crazy things. So it's a space that's kind of hard for Beatrix to focus in. But they are making some progress, but she's finally kind of just like, I need to look at this in a different way. And she wants to do kind of a more physical, visual representation of some of their information to just shift perspectives. Sometimes that helps. You read something, on your computer versus on paper versus an iPad or a Kindle. You see different things and you experience the story slightly differently. So she's kind of taking that track of, let's just try looking at this in a different way. So they hunt down some supplies and kind of looking for ways that they can bring their information to life a little bit. And they kind of collect a few things from the office, so you get to see a little bit more of like what their office is like and just kind of how the people are who are in it, which is, kind of like, haphazard. They do what they need to do, but it's not, like super ambitious, go get them kind of an office in general. So they collect some supplies, and then at that point, Katie realizes it's like time to go home. And whereas Beatrix is like, well, who cares? Like, let's keep working. Let's get stuff done. But Katie kind of points out like, hey, you told me that I'm supposed to help you like keep things normal. And she's like, I do not stay past 5. Like, she values her personal time. And so she doesn't stay late working. So she kind of talks her into taking everything home. And so they gather up their supplies and head back to Katie's house. And so this, again, I'm bringing Katie's personality to kind of liven things up here. And they take the supplies and she immediately starts calling it a murder board. A few people have died, but she is kind of one of those, like, she loves the visual aspect of it and laying it all out. And it reminds her of, fun mysteries that she likes to watch, which annoys Beatrix. And she's like, so they have a little bit of just some minor, like, personality bumping up against each other kind of moments here, just kind of showing where some of that potential is. Like, Katie does have interesting things and good ideas, but she's going to have a different approach to things than Beatrix. And sometimes that's going to be a little obnoxious on both sides. Like, they'll get a little frustrated with each other here and there. So they're kind of getting their stuff together and getting ready to go home. And I didn't want to immediately go from having a conversation about the case to then, driving home to have another conversation about the case. So I have everything ready to go, and I've given a little tiny peek at some potential conflict between their two characters that will potentially, cause some issues later on. But they still have, one more thing to follow up on, especially since they're kind of at a dead end at the moment with anything to do with the water quality. Like, nothing is showing up as helpful. So the only thing that they really have to follow up on at the moment is Mr. Padilla from Chapter 4, who they, kind of got in and helped get help to and save his life. So Beatrix asks, how would we know if he's still in the hospital, and how would we contact him? And this kind of gave me a chance to build a little bit more, just a teeny bit, because I don't want to put the focus too much on Katie, but I do want the reader to get to know her a little bit more and kind of see how her personality is developed and who she is. So bringing up Mr. Padilla gives Katie kind of a moment to say, like, oh yeah, I know the procedure. Like, we can call and ask, and if he's been put on the patient directory, they'll tell us, but if not, we won't know. She says, she's familiar with that from when her dad was dying. And so I don't dwell on that, but I kind of set the tone that this is going to be another one of those moments that's a little bit hard for Katie to deal with. Like, losing her dad is still a bit raw. And this time Beatrix recognizes that ahead of time and kind of tells her, hey, if I'll take the lead on this. If you need to just kind of ball your energy up and shut things out, that's fine. Don't put yourself in a situation where, she's going to be upset and that's going to be harmful to her. And Katie, she kind of has Beatrix as a buffer, so she does hold herself back, and she's not, making comments or offering insights or anything. She stays kind of reserved and quiet, a little bit further away from experiencing what Beatrix is saying and doing, and the effects of the body. So she does retreat a bit, which hopefully is giving the reader a little bit more sense of, with all her happiness and color and cheerfulness and all of that, She does have some pain and some grief that she's dealing with, and it does affect her. But her coping mechanism is to be out doing things and being a positive influence on others and being, helpful. Like that helps her deal with her grief better. So again, kind of just giving a little bit more insight into who Katie is so that as the story progresses, the reader, hopefully that'll help kind of put some pieces together as we go through this. But again, I don't want to overload it. So I'm trying to just find little tiny ways to sneak these things into the chapters. So they are able to find out where Mr. Padilla is and that he's still in the hospital. They're still monitoring him. So they show up to visit and his whole extended family is there, which kind of surprises Beatrix because she had gotten the impression that that the two of them were kind of on their own and alone, maybe they didn't have much help. And then they find out they actually have children and cousins and, all of that there. And once they knew what was going on, they all descended and showed up to be a support. But the elder Padillas are pretty resistant to asking for help. They don't want to be a burden on the rest of their family. So she gets to experience their family, which is interesting for her. And we kind of get this sense that this is unusual in the karmic world. They don't have the same kind of structures as far as families and how that works. So not that, this is the first time she's done this, but moments like that always kind of stand out to her because it is such a foreign thing. It's very human in her mind. And it's just a different experience for her when she's, surrounded by this loving, supporting family. So they kind of get some updates as far as Mr. Padilla and his status. And they're so glad he's okay and all of that. And they chat with the family. And they get some details on how he was treated as best as the family understood. So she kind of gets some details on what saved him, but it's the same treatment that a lot of things would get. So it's, stuff to bring his heart rate up, to, calm his breathing, different things like that, where she's kind of disappointed because she's just well, that could apply to, 20 different, she doesn't know it's a poison yet, but whatever it is, she knows that doesn't really help narrow it down because it's a very common treatment to just you're treating the symptoms. You don't actually know what's wrong, so you just treat the symptoms. And I tried in this chapter to implant a few unnoticeable hints, hopefully readers notice just a teeny bit, but not enough to be that's important. I should pay attention to that. I just wanted to build in little tiny mentions of things of what he was doing in the morning leading up to this attack and suddenly getting ill. And so I have the wife just kind of talking about it was just so bizarre that this happened so fast. We were, having breakfast and he checked the mail and, drinking our coffee and I started, doing dishes or whatever. And she's just kind of describing their morning of, this just came out of nowhere. So I didn't want any one thing to really stand out, but I do want to have it in the reader's mind of this is what they were doing. These are the different puzzle pieces of their morning. And something led to the interaction with what makes him ill. And hopefully then when they go and talk to some of the other families that have been affected, they'll remember at least some of those and kind of take note to start thinking there are some similarities between what's happening, but it's something that's just going to kind of sit in the back of the mind and not be oh, I figured it all out on, chapter 8, trying to avoid that. But I do want to be planting those little hints and clues early on so that it does not later kind of come off as oh, what? They didn't even tell us, going back to the Rue Morgue and, he solves the crime and by not having told the reader about the evidence that he found of the orange hair that, it was the orangutan that did it. Sorry, spoiler if you are not familiar with the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe. But I don't like those kind of tricky mysteries where the character, the narrator, is hiding things from the reader so they can be a surprise of oh, gotcha, I found this evidence that I never even told you about. And that's how I solved it. I prefer to do mysteries more where I'm giving the reader the clues, but not in your face way, but they can kind of catalog them and tuck them away in their mind and then build on that. Like I want the reader to be able to go along with the character and find the pieces and, hopefully not actually like figure it out till the very end, because hopefully it's a good complex mystery. But I don't like hiding things from the reader. I think that causes a lot of disappointment for readers when it's like, well, what the heck? Like, how was I supposed to figure it out? You didn't even tell me about that. Or like, wow, that really came out of left field. What the heck? So I don't want to do that. So I am dropping little hints here, and the family tells them that, basically they were told that their dad/grandpa experienced a cholinergic crisis, and that they treated him with atropine and Tupam. And like I said, like those are very kind of like general terms of like, yeah, like his body was shutting down. And we gave him, something to speed up his heart and to calm the respiratory distress. So that doesn't help much. But when she describes what they did that morning, kind of explaining, him checking the mail and the foods that they ate, and, they're in their home, they're not out and about being exposed to something unusual. So it was something within their home that they believe caused this. They just don't know what it was. So the family kind of questions a little bit why Beatrice/Katie was there. They're a little bit confused, but they're more grateful than anything that she was there to get them help. So they don't push too far. Her responses are a little bit vague of just like, yeah, there was a problem with, some of the meters, and I was just checking into it. And, she kind of just gives them a vague response, but they're just really happy that things turned out well, so they don't really push her on it. But I know with other visits where she's going to talk to families, she's going to need a better excuse and reason to be there. And I'm not 100% sure what that's going to be quite yet. But I know that, there's going to be other families who are going to be a little bit more inquisitive and hesitant to just let a random city employee into their house. So I'm thinking on that of like how she's going to get access to some of these families without tipping them off that she's doing something unusual, and without having them like call her supervisors and be like, what's with this weird lady coming out to ask me questions? Because I want to keep this realistic. Like I wouldn't just let some random city employee into my house because they're like, yeah, something about the utilities and checking things and whatever. I'd be like, no, like I didn't get a letter about this. I'm going to call someone to check, because it would be weird. And especially the homes with the children that have been affected, I think they're going to be like extra cautious, because none of them still know like what happened to almost kill their child. So they're going to be really cautious about letting someone in. And then I also need to avoid like setting off a panic in the town. If she comes in and says, well, we think there might have been like some problems with the water, those families are immediately going to go to Facebook and start posting stuff and being like, nobody should drink the water. It made my kid sick. He almost died. What's wrong with the city? And then someone's at the city is going to start looking into that and being like, what the heck are you doing? Why are you telling people this? So like I said, still trying to figure out how she's going to gain access to make this believable and make it so she can actually get the information that she needs. So that was where I stopped. They get the information, and then she kind of walks away from the experience being like, man, like that just was not helpful. She'd really been hoping to get more information about his health and like what caused it. And she really doesn't. So she's a little disappointed as they leave the hospital. So that's where I ended chapter 5. And I kind of took a break after that and, just did whatever around the house. And I've been trying to turn old podcast episodes into videos, and that's super annoyingly time consuming, but trying to get some content up on my newer YouTube channel. I kind of set one up to be for my new author account and also for Del Cherie Press as well. So I'm kind of building that and getting some content in there. And so I'm kind of doing that in between other things because, again, it's painfully slow and annoying, but I'm eventually going to get there. So I took a break from chapter 5 and started thinking about chapter 6 because I knew in my head as I was going through that, this is the point they're going to go back to Katie's house. They're going to work on creating the murder board and putting everything together. And I was like, I don't want this chapter to just be them like sitting around the house chit-chatting about what they've learned. Because honestly, they haven't learned that much yet. They're struggling to find any meaningful information that's going to help solve this case. And so again, I was thinking of just what is going to keep this chapter interesting. So I was kind of, just letting that like percolate while I was doing other things. And I'd had the thought as I was, mentally kind of putting the pieces together and writing this in my head before I came back to the computer, that I needed something when she goes out to talk to some of the other families. It would be nice if there was some way that she could use her karmic energy in some way, like for that to be useful. She's a different type of being. She's made of karmic energy. So would she be able to have any sense or interaction with it in the human world? Because the human world, like it's obviously a more physical world, but it is still, heavily influenced by the karmic energy. It flows between the 3 dimensions. So I was kind of like, well, it wouldn't necessarily make sense if she's just kind of like shut off from that because she's come into the human world. Like there would still be some connection or ability to sense or a perception of that energy, and that could be very useful. So I thought that what I wanted to build into the world and how it works, I had mentioned before that they link the disturbances, the smaller and the larger ones, link them together with a specific signature. And so I thought, what if Beatrix can actually sense that as well through her own karmic energy? Like she's kind of, once she identifies the energy of a disturbance, she can kind of catalog that, kind of like a dog, the ones that are trained to go, sniff stuff out, find, corpses or drugs or whatever else. Like they learn a specific scent and then they're able to go out and identify that in other places. So I wanted to have her experience that. And so I went back to the earlier chapters. I think I put maybe one line or something back in chapter 4. And then I went back to chapter 5 as well before I jumped into chapter 6. And I describe her when they enter the hospital and they get up to the floor where Mr. Padilla's on. She's curious if anyone else there is also connected to the disturbance. So as they walk by the doors, she's kind of sensing the temperature, basically, and seeing like, okay, anything over here, anything over here. And she doesn't find anything else in that wing until she gets to Mr. Padilla's room, and she's able to kind of feel the same thing that she did earlier at his house. And so that kind of cements for her the signal, or whatever I end up calling it, like what that is. She's able to kind of cement, this is what I'm looking for. So I can use that later when she goes to the different houses to kind of start piecing together not only the people involved, but also the locations. Because I'm not going to have, not every single person affected was in their home. Sometimes they were out and about and got sick from different exposures in different places. So I think that will help me build that in and keep the flow of information going without it being too obvious of what they're finding. She may just be in a location or be around a person and get that sensory indication of, oh, this person's connected, but not necessarily knowing why, to hopefully, like I said, to balance out, like keeping the story moving, but not giving too much information too fast. So we'll see how that goes. Again, it was kind of something that it popped into my head and I was like, yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I want to include that and build that into the world. So I will find ways to utilize that ability as we go through the next couple of chapters, particularly. Because I think there's going to be a lot of just kind of like, footwork, going out, talking to people, figuring things out. How she's going to explain that to her work, I'm not totally sure. I'm still working on that, but I will figure something out. So that led me into chapter 6. And I also build on here. Oh, I did forget to mention scatterbrain today. With Katie throughout the hospital, she does kind of take a back seat. And this made me realize, like, I hadn't really talked about how I've been describing Katie's emotions and her responses, because she's no longer in control of her physical form. So, she's not, blushing or getting warm or shaking or anything like that. So what I've been doing to kind of give her more than just like this floating existence of amorphous energy, I've been describing what her energy does when influenced by her emotions. So when she's, scared, she kind of pulls all her energy in and balls up to like protect herself. Other times when she's happy or excited about something, it's more like bubbly or fizzy. Anxiety, kind of like a shaky trembliness to her energy. And then I've also been pointing out like the times when she has really strong emotions, her energy reacts in a bigger way, and that actually like has an effect on Beatrix's consciousness at that point. Like if she really, freaks out over something, it kind of gives Beatrix a little bit of whiplash or feeling stunned for a second. So that was something I think I hadn't really addressed in the previous episodes, and that I wanted to kind of point out because I intend to use that later on, where she is going to have some more extreme reactions or very strong feelings about situations as she's kind of exposed to more of the negative effects of this disturbance and the people being hurt particularly. So, that was just something that I had made a note of that I hadn't really talked about later. Now on to chapter 6. So chapter 6, like I said, I needed to avoid this just being like, here's something we learned, and here's an idea, and here's a thought, and blah, 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 blah. Just them sitting around talking. I wanted to get in a little bit more characterization, not only for Katie, because you get to learn a little bit more about her world and who she is, but also about Beatrix. We've gotten to know her personality and kind of her general feeling of like being a little bit jaded and soured on the situation that she's in. She's a little bit of a negative outlook at the moment, but we don't really have a lot of details on why and kind of if she's ever been different, just what her history is. So at the beginning of the chapter, I do kind of follow up on the murder board. I try to make it a little bit more like upbeat and funny because, of course, all of Katie's craft supplies are like sparkly and glitter and fun colors. So their murder board is like a kindergarten art project of like all kinds of things and rainbows and funny thumbtacks and different things. So just kind of contrasting Beatrix's more serious personality and the way she would approach something, but the only supplies she has are, it looks like the room's been taken over by kindergarten art class. So I just kind of had a little bit of fun with that, with just contrasting their two personalities again. I do give a little bit more information as they're kind of putting things together, where you get more specific details on who the other victims are, their ages, and noting some of the similarities between symptoms and reactions and deaths. And like they make notes again, like they kind of see like, yeah, these two had very similar, but these ones were way different. And they're starting to sort things out, but still nothing is really like falling into place. And they're not seeing a pattern of anything quite yet. Everything seems really random. They get a big map. They put the locations of the different victims. And, it just looks like someone threw some thumbtacks at the board and they landed where they landed. So they're organizing things, but again, nothing is really coming together yet, which is increasing Beatrix's frustration with the situation. And she's kind of getting like a little bit more grumpy in this section, which Katie kind of just counterbalances with like, but aren't the sparkles so pretty? Like, look how cute that glitter is. And just having fun with them. But again, like I couldn't spend the whole chapter doing that because there's not that much to report yet. And just a whole bunch of talking sitting around. Even if there is, rainbow colored glue involved, that can get a little bit draggy for the reader. So I'd been thinking, I think I got about half of this written and then took a break to, do whatever, clean something, trying to break stuff up with getting some chores that are sorely needed to be done that I neglected during the school year, get a few things done. So I kind of took a break after they get the murder board put together, which Beatrix prefers to call a disturbance map, not a murder board. So they get that put together, and then I was thinking, just as I was doing other stuff, what can I do to disrupt this scene so I can switch gears and still give them a chance to, be in that moment and discuss what's going on, but also show a little bit more of their characters right now. And I was probably influenced because our shelter here in town, I used to work at the animal shelter. It was kind of an in-between transitionary job as I was working on finishing my master's, and I needed healthcare and benefits after my divorce. And, it was one that came up, and I love animals. And so I worked there for about a year and a half. And I love animals. It's really hard to work at a shelter love animals, because it can be really sad. It can be really hard, especially the time that I was there was really hard. We had a distemper outbreak, and they ended up having to euthanize most of the dogs there. So that kind of, broke me down a little bit. And I had finished my master's and was looking for something else at that time. And it was like, yeah, this is, as much as I love animals, like I can't do this forever. I would just become a depressed mess at some point. But our shelter recently, I'm still part of their like foster group. And I just keep seeing like post after post of, baby kittens and puppies and moms with babies. And they're just overflowing right now, and constant pleas for fosters and supplies and all of that. So that was kind of on my mind just because I keep seeing that. But I'm like, we already have 3 dogs and they're all kind of neurotic and need a lot. So we're not in a place where we can foster and give the extra care that's needed for either the babies or the sick guys. But they have been on my mind, and I keep an eye. And if there's like true emergency cases and the other option is to euthanize, like, yeah, I would volunteer at that point. And and Chris knows that. I'm like, I've warned him. I'm like, there may be a day if it's a real emergency, I'll just show up at home with puppies or kittens or something. But so far, I have not had to do that because other people have stepped up, which is great. But it had been on my mind. And so I kind of thought, like, this is something that Katie would definitely be involved in. She just has this, like, deep love for other people and creatures, and she can't stand seeing suffering. So she's one that if she became aware of a need, she would be a person to step in and offer help or support in some way. So I do take a little bit of kind of creative liberty with this because, I don't know, at least where I worked, this is not how the situation would go down. But I'm kind of imagining this, rather than this being, a city-run shelter with, specific policies and stuff. It's kind of a smaller rescue operation, a few people running it, kind of bare on resources, but they do the best they can. And so as they're kind of in the middle of putting their murder board together and doing kind of just some review of what they've figured out so far, Katie gets a call on her phone, and Beatrix is just going to ignore it because they're in the middle of something, but she sees who it's from, and she's just like, oh my gosh, like, you have to answer that right now. And as soon as she answers, she starts, she's in her ear telling her what to say, ask them how many. Okay, they're coming, like, I have all the supplies over here. And Beatrix doesn't really have any clue what's going on. She's just saying what Katie would say and then following her directions. And she starts, getting supplies that Katie is telling her to get. And she's like, what the heck did I just get into? She's got like syringes and a heating pad and cotton balls and tiny bottles. And she's just like, what on earth? And this is not something that she has like been pulled into before with, she's been doing this for like 3,000 years, but this is kind of a new experience. And then the person who had called shows up on the front door with basically a box of puppies. And they're like brand new puppies. Someone had just dumped them. And so this rescue coordinator, someone called her and she picks them up. And she had told Katie like she was already sitting with a very ill dog, and so she couldn't take care of these newborn bottle babies. And Katie always takes this kind of situation. Like, she'll step in, she'll be the foster. But I didn't want to have this, last through the rest of the book, because even with bottle babies, like it's a solid, 2 to 3 weeks of feeding them by bottle before they're even able to start with gruel. And I was like, oh, that's going to be too long. Like, that's going to really hamper their ability to go out and do what they need to do. That was just going to be kind of too much. So the rescue worker kind of tells Katie, like, I have someone else who can take them, long term, but I need you to take them tonight, and then I'll pick them back up sometime like tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon once the other foster is available. So I'm kind of setting it up like Katie is more of like the emergency situation foster, because she has a lot going on and she's involved in a lot of things. She is more likely to, take those emergency cases and then hand them off to someone who can, care for them full time. Because she has a day job and everything. So that would be really hard to do. Like, they're going to have to take the puppies to work with them tomorrow. In the story. And like her people in her office are used to that. And if it's bottle babies don't do a whole much, They, they sleep and lay in a box for the most part. But she wouldn't be able to keep doing that long term. Like that would become a problem after they're a little bit more mobile and noisy and, pooping on everything. As much as I love puppies, they are disgusting. They poop on everything and they don't care. And then they walk in it and roll in it and then they can poop everywhere. So I knew this couldn't be like a long-term part of the story, but I did want to disrupt the scene to show who Katie is, that she is absolutely someone who will step in a situation like this. She'll drop everything and feed baby puppies or kittens every 2 hours to keep them alive. And this also gave me a chance to show Beatrix's personality a bit more, because she is at first like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? We can't stop in the middle of everything and take care of puppies. She's a little bit just kind of like blown away. But she also is not awful. So she's going to do it, but she's a little overwhelmed and grumpy about it at first. But we learn here that because like she's from a karmic dimension where we learn a little bit more about how like people come to be in those worlds. And like I mentioned earlier, she's kind of like overwhelmed and touched by the family support for the Pitiyas. And so I kind of drop in some details here that like families are not really a thing in the karmic worlds. Basically, like there's marriages or like partnerships, but there are not, like children are not created. They form out of the energy. And it's a very balanced system, at least in Beatrix's dimension. The chaotic dimension, probably not so much. I'm still thinking about that. But they keep a balance of, when a spirit or when an energy, a karmic being, when their energy depletes, a new karmic being is formed. And they kind of just poof, like they show up. And so they don't really have families. Like they may develop a partnership with someone, kind of a lifelong partnership. Maybe it doesn't always last, but maybe, a couple 100 years and then maybe you grow apart, move on. Like that part of it, normal relationship type stuff. But they don't really have families and they don't have animals. They don't have pets. There is none of that. So I added in the detail that the karmic beings, at least in Beatrix's world, they are incredibly fascinated by the idea of animals, particularly pets, domesticated pets. They, like who doesn't love a puppy? But they especially love the idea of pets and that companionship that they bring and how humans treat them. And they get very upset when humans don't treat them right. And so I kind of adding a little bit more depth to Beatrix's world and showing like where their interests in the human world lie. Like humans, they're kind of like, a lot of them are like Beatrix of like, like they're like toddlers. They're constantly just causing problems. Why can't they just figure things out? But they see a lot of the animals as just like more pure, innocent beings who are just there to be companions and to be loved and to be cute. And so they love animals. So even though she was a little bit grumpy about the disruption of these baby puppies, there's 3 of them being dropped off, and then having to go through the process of feeding them. And then for those who don't know, like baby puppies and kittens don't know how to eliminate their waste on their own. They can't pee or poop. The mom licking them is what stimulates that to happen, and then their body learns how to do it on their own. So when there's not a mom around, then the human caretaker has to do that with, like a little moistened cotton ball. And so she has to do this, and she's kind of like, oh, like gross. But she's really, by the end of it, she's really taken in by caring for these puppies and just like their helplessness, their need for someone to be there for them. And so she's really kind of emotionally affected by this interaction that she's having with the puppies and with Katie explaining all of this to her and showing her knowledge and her kindness and her love for these animals. That really, kind of helps them bond a little bit. It helps Beatrix, step back from some of her frustration and annoyance with the situation and some of her earlier irritation with Katie and the sparkles and glitter and all of that. Kind of just helps her like bring herself back down and remember why she's actually here. She's here to help, to save lives. It just puts her a little bit more back in touch with her compassion for other beings, which has been a little tenuous lately because she's, again, just like so frustrated and irritated with the whole situation that she's in. that this kind of serves as a reminder of what she's doing. Up until, Katie tells her they're going to have to repeat this whole process every 2 hours. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's kind of forever. As I was working on chapter 6 in trying to talk about like the differences between Beatrix's world and the human world, and then there were a few times I also needed to like reference or talk about the chaotic dimension, I really got to the point where I was like, not having names for these worlds is getting really annoying because it's hard to talk about it. And I don't want to just keep saying like the karmic world and the chaotic world because they're more than that. And so I started thinking like, what are these worlds like? Like, yes, the chaotic karmic world, like their point is to cause disruption and chaos. Again, like that's pretty one-dimensional. I need it to be a little bit more than that. And I think that finding the right name is important. And so I spent probably way too much time looking up like different languages and what do these words mean in different languages. And then I got on a whole other sidetrack of like, well, what are some of the oldest languages? And I didn't really want to go with Latin because I think that's used a lot, especially in like fantasy magic-based systems. So I kind of was like, I don't want to go there. And I was like, well, I could take a word from this language and one from this language, just like what sounded. Because a lot of the words for chaos, like, were really similar to chaos. And I was like, well, that's dumb. Like, not the languages, but like picking a word. And I'm like, well, like, why look to a different language if they basically all sound very similar? And so I kind of went back and forth on things and looking up like, okay, well, what are different synonyms? Or should I just make up a nonsense word and go with that? And it was kind of when I was looking back at like, what are the oldest spoken languages? That if at some point these 3 dimensions had contact with each other, like what would be the oldest language that potentially they could have some connection between? And that led me to Sanskrit. And I don't think I want to take like just directly take the Sanskrit words, but I think I'm going to kind of use those as a base. I'm still playing around with them a little bit, and I'll probably kind of adjust slightly as I go through them. But that's kind of where my thoughts are at right now. I haven't settled on anything specific, but yeah, I'm kind of leaning more toward that. And I think that will give me somewhere to build from. Like, has it always been this way? Have the 3 dimensions always been disconnected in this manner? Or at some point, was there more interaction and awareness? So that's kind of floating around in my mind too. I will mention as I start to wrap up that with chapter 6, I ended up going back to this chapter multiple times. My first pass through, I felt like was just a little bit too surface level. And so it was like, first I went back and kind of added more to the conversation between Beatrix and Katie as they're putting the murder board and kind of reviewing what they've learned. And I feel like I, put a little bit more personality into that, added a little bit more depth. And then I had originally kind of wrote through the puppy section. And as I, was off doing chores and other things, kind of came back to it. And I don't think there's enough there because there wasn't enough emotion attached to it. And so I went back and kind of added more to their discussion of how to care for the puppies and why, and the connection that Katie has to all of this. And I felt like that improved it, added a little bit more characterization to it, but it was more focused on Katie. And so I kind of let it sit again for a little bit, and then I came back to it one more time because I felt like I needed more characterization with Beatrix to balance it out. And that's where I kind of came back and added some of those details about the karmic world not having animals and being fascinated with the idea of pets, and then her having a little bit more of a bond form with these puppies and feeling kind of some kinship there with Katie after having been a little bit irritated with her. And so it gave me a little bit more to bring in the worlds, but then to build the characters a little bit more. And so I think after, I wrote the first one, I went back, adjusted the first conversation, then came back twice to add more detail and depth to the second half of the chapter with the puppies. And then I finally was kind of feeling like, I think I struck the right balance and the right level of emotion at that point. It's still kind of one on my mind that it's like, I may take, even more of a look at it when I come back for revisions. But for right now, I felt like I gave more purpose to the chapter by bringing in some more solid characterization, as well as some history of the worlds and how they work and how they interact with each other. So even though there's not a lot of new information as far as the mystery brought in, I think it really did its job on highlighting the characters and the worlds and hopefully drawing the reader more into the story by creating that relationship with the characters a little bit more. So that's kind of where I finished off, is with the end of chapter 6. I am not 100% sure where I'm going to go with chapter 7. I know Katie is expected back at work the next day and they're going to have to take the puppies with them. But that's also kind of going to chain them to the puppies. So I don't know. I'm thinking about that because I've kind of had some lower energy chapters 2 in a row and not a lot of new information. So I want to make sure the pace picks up and have them being more active. But that, because the puppies need to be fed every 2 hours, I've got that complication in there that I've got to think about and try to figure out a little bit more. So that will take me a little bit of planning to kind of sort through before I'm ready to go back to work on chapter 7. So I did kind of switch over to the Not Karmic series at this point. Started working on that chapter there. Didn't get too super far yet. So once I get a little bit further into that and I'm ready to give an update, I'll probably do a couple of chapters before I pop back on to update with a new episode. But that's kind of my plan at the moment. Think about how I'm going to bring a little bit more action into the Karmic story in the next couple of chapters. And then hopefully that'll kind of percolate and sort itself out in my subconscious while I am working on the next chapter or 2 of the Not Karmic story. So that's where we're ending. Thanks again for listening. This is a fun process of trying to piece together all of this and share it with you guys who are listening. So I appreciate people coming back to listen to more episodes and just kind of see what it's like to try to put together a coherent story or 2, as it turned out. And kind of this has just wandered off into all kinds of places. But if you are interested about some of my other projects or what I'm doing with kind of the republishing and renaming and all of that mess that I'm sorting through, I'm pretty easy to find. Just search for Del Cherie and then I'll come up all over the place, because that's the benefit of having a unique name that most people can't spell or pronounce, but makes it easy to find me. So I will be back soon with another episode. Thank you guys for listening.